going to fly into Vienna, and it's called the City of Dreams. It's very much an imperial city. It's a fascinating city historically. So much of sort of the great ideas of Europe come out of Vienna, but also some of the bad ideas of Europe come out of Vienna. It's a place where, it may be off sort of our radar, intellectual radar, but it was very much central to European culture for so long. And we're going to be following a little bit in the footsteps of Blessed Karl and Empress Zita. And we have a wonderful painting of them in our church. We have a relic of Blessed Karl. And so there are going to be a number of saints that we sort of touch on, but running through the whole of the trip in many ways will be Karl and Zita. And so if you go, and even if you don't go, you should learn more about them. And I can begin to sort of share with those who are going videos and options to read books, because it'll be great to go sort of prepared to see these places. So this is just to give you an idea of some of the people and some of the events that happened in Vienna. This is the Cathedral, the Stephansdom in Vienna. Okay, so the funeral of Antonio Vivaldi was held here. Mozart's wedding was held here. His funeral was held here. Haydn's wedding was held here. Franz Joseph's funeral, the emperor who died before Blessed Karl. Zita's funeral was held here. And Otto's funeral was held here. The son of Karl and Zita. So you see how I'm saying that so much of this is part of that faded empire. We will, according to this itinerary, and you're welcome to pick one of these up. Loretta has some of these over there on the table. We'll land in Vienna and we'll do the Ringstrasse, and this is just it's probably more of a bus tour around the city so that you can see a lot of it. This is the ring that goes over the street that goes in a ring around the historic part of the city. And so we'll see a lot of the sites there. And I think essential for us historically when we go is to keep in mind one of the events that occurred in Vienna, which is a pivotal moment in Western history, and that's the Battle of Vienna, which occurred on September the 11th and September the 12th, 1683. And in all of this, you have to remember, right, that the Ottoman Empire lasted for a very long time, and that one of its goals was to take over Europe. And so the empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, really was the last sort of vestiges of Christendom, and it resisted the Ottoman Empire, heroically so. And so this is one of the moments where that occurred. It was a miraculous moment. The Christians should not have won, but they did. And so that's going to be a big part of our sort of historical thing to have in our minds as we move through this pilgrimage. So, today we drink cappuccinos and we have a croissant. And the reason we drink the cappuccino is because of Marco di Alviano, who was a Capuchin friar who preached in the Battle of Vienna and tried to make sure he rallied the troops. Right? And he was buried in Vienna, and thereafter the royal family is buried around him. And we also see croissant is a sort of reference to Islam because it was trying to take over. And there was a story where there were some bakers working on bread, and they heard digging underneath them. They alerted the forces, and they found out that it was the Muslim Ottomans trying to undermine the walls and the defenses of Vienna. And so after that, they started making the croissant. So there's very much a coffee house culture in Vienna, and this is one of the reasons why it has many good things that happen there, but also bad ideas, because coffee houses are great places for intellectuals and artists to sort of gather, to think and to communicate. So it's a part of our Western culture, coffee. And it's interesting because coffee kind of comes into Europe slowly, and it was considered too bitter. And so the idea was, well, if they add milk to it, it won't be so bitter. And so that's why, the Muslims drink almost drink more espresso kind of coffee. But, for coffee to sort of make it into the West, they needed a little bit of milk, thus the cappuccino. In the Crypt Church, we'll visit this place, and this is the tomb of Blessed Zita, the Empress. Her husband is not buried there. They would not let Karl's body back, even dead, into Vienna. But she is buried there. But you can do a whole history of Catholic and European history just in that crypt. There's so many royals that are buried there, and we'll have an opportunity to walk through all the very many emperors and empresses and queens and kings' tombs and talk about that history. And that again is in the Catholic Church. We'll visit the Hofburg Palace in Vienna, which was a residence of Karl and Zita at the time of World War I. And you have to understand that while they lived in the palace, she was like, Zita was very worried about the people of Vienna, and she was giving food away and having royal carriages used as ambulances. So, it looks very elegant to us, but it was also a place of charity in World War I. We're going to have Mass at this beautiful church, which is not terribly old, St. Francis Church. And I'm sorry if I mispronounce things, okay? Because my Polish and my Hungarian is not very good. But in the Mexican lots, that's German, obviously. But Germany, Vienna, there were only two countries in the world that pushed back against the Nazis when the Anschlag happened. And one of them was Mexico. And to sort of honor Mexico, they have this plaza dedicated to Mexico. And this church that it's built on is kind of an imitation or an homage to the church which Charlemagne built in Aachen. So again, that's that idea of the empire, right? You've got the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which is kind of a carrying over from Charlemagne. So you've got Charlemagne's church in Aachen and Karl's church in Vienna, and he was crowned here, right? So, so there's this kind of this kind of bookend, kind of sort of symbolism of Charles and Charles, beginning and ending. Anyway, that'll be a great place to have Mass. One of the things that I wanted to put in is a visit to the cemetery. You think, oh, how boring for her, but this is where, like, basically every composer that you've ever heard of is buried. And I think that'll just be a lot of fun to go see Tim, Beethoven, Mozart, all these great composers. And it just points out, I think, the centrality of Vienna. When we think of Catholic, when we think of classical culture, classical music, we're really thinking of Vienna in many ways. So we'll leave Vienna, and then we're going to head to Budapest. And they're about 2.5 hours apart, so not far. But we're going to take the scenic route, and we're going to make 2 stops along the way. But just to give you a sense of where we're headed. And we're going to be basically following the Danube, which is the second longest river in Europe. It used to be the border of the Roman Empire. It's an essential river that's had a lot of history, and it's a beautiful river. So we'll be following that down. We're not on a boat. We will have, I think, a meal or two on the Danube, but we're not taking a cruise down. We're taking a bus or a coach to stop along the way. One of the places we're stopping, and I'm going to butcher this, so I'm going to say it, is this town. And we're going to have Mass here. This is where St. Martin of Tours was born. We have an icon of St. Martin in our church. Incidentally, St. Martin is obviously born in Hungary. The hearts of Carl and Zita are buried together in a monastery that's dedicated to St. Martin. And then the other place we're stopping along the way is the old capital of Budapest. The old capital of Hungary. And this is where St. Stephen, the king, had his court. This is where St. Margaret of Scotland was born and raised. And so we're going to see a powerful, and St. Stephen is another person who's going to be central to our trip, right? He's going to be, almost every cathedral we're going to visit, almost every town we visit, is going to have something dedicated to St. Stephen. This is, Budapest is the capital now. And Budapest became the capital, and then Islam took it over. And so, these capitals, they were capitals for a while, then they were Muslim, and then they became capitals again. So, this is, I think, the largest church in Hungary. But then our ultimate trip is to take us to Budapest. And this is the modern-day capital of Hungary. Hungary is an interesting city, interesting country. Got a lot of really interesting history to it. Even today, politically, it's very interesting. It's pushing back. It's considered a very conservative European country, in part because it has so much history with militant Islam having only really been liberated not that historically long ago. And so they're much more reticent to be accommodating to a lot of immigrants in Hungary. I think probably smartly so. We'll be at the Basilica. We'll visit the Basilica. We'll have Mass there. There's a relic of St. Stephen the King's hand. And there is a statue of St. Gerard. And if you don't know, our church here at Peachtree Corners is built by things that came to us from Buffalo, from a church that was dedicated to St. Gerard. St. Gerard is a saint who lived and died in Budapest. And he was brought to Hungary by St. Stephen. We're starting to see these kind of interesting ways that the Lord is connecting dots. Also, there he was brought to teach Saint Emmerich, who's the son of St. Stephen. And Emmerich was the namesake of the man for whom our continent really is named, America. So it's kind of wonderful little connections that we're going to make. And Karl was crowned here. Okay, so he was the Austro-Hungarian emperor. I don't know that he was ever actually crowned in Mexico, in Austria, but he might have been declared king there. But he had to be crowned in Hungary, and he was crowned at this church. And that he was crowned with the crown of St. Stephen. So this is on Fisherman's Bastion in the castle of Buda. And there's this wonderful statue of St. Stephen the King wearing the crown of St. Stephen, which has a funny history because all of this, was sort of wrapped up behind the Iron Curtain for a while. I mean, this is such a volatile part of the changing, challenging part of Europe. And one of the things that happened was the crown of St. Stephen ends up in the hands of the Americans after World War II, I believe. And it's brought back to Kentucky. And it's kept at Fort Knox for many years. And it was President Jimmy Carter who gave it back to Hungary. He was criticized for doing so because it was still, at the time, communist. So here's the hill where St. Gerard died, with a spectacular view of the city. There's St. Gerard holding up the cross. And again, Stephen hired or brought in St. Gerard to evangelize the Hungarian people. And here's the actual crown of St. Stephen, which we will see, which I think is amazing. And it's there waiting for the next king of Hungary to come back, whenever that may be. And it's kept in the Parliament building, which is one of the most beautiful buildings in Europe. And we'll go in there, I believe, to see the actual crown. And this is Karl wearing the crown. It always has this crooked little cross. Whatever happened, I don't know the story of it, but it must have happened a long time ago, and no one's dared to fix it. So it always looks a little funny. Here is St. Gerard teaching St. Emmerich. And here's a map of Buda and Pest. You see that one city is Pest, and one city is Buda, and they just kind of came together with bridges, and they became Budapest. So we'll spend some time there, and then on April 10th, we'll wake up and we'll cross the Carpathians into Poland. That'll be a 6-hour journey through these beautiful mountains, and we'll be driving to Krakow. And in Krakow, we'll see the cathedral where John Paul II was bishop. And we'll see St. Mary's Basilica. And we have some time in Krakow to sort of unwind and relax. In fact, we have a free day in Krakow, unless we want to. There are a couple of excursions you can do that you don't have to do in Krakow. One of the excursions that you could do is to go to the famous salt mines, which are these mines where they've carved, altars and all sorts of things out of salt. This is a solid block of salt. So that's not so much a sort of spiritual thing as it is just a lot of fun. You can see cultural things, but one of the things on April 12th we're going to be doing, which is awesome, is to go to Czestochowa and to see the monastery at Jasna Gora. And remember the Battle of Vienna was so important, and one of the reasons one of the reasons that they won, that the Christians won, was because of King Jan Sobieski from Poland. And he came to the defense of Vienna. And he had stopped in this monastery and prayed before the Black God. So we'll see the actual icon. On the way back, we're going to stop and see the shrine at Auschwitz that Father Maximilian Kolbe. And then the next day there's a free day again, or there's an optional trip to Zakopane, which is up in the Carpathians. It's beautiful. I've been there I've been to Krakow, I've been to Vienna. I don't know them well. I've not been to Budapest. So I have a lot of learning to do so that I can be a good pilgrim's guide. But I think these are some things that are definitely on my bucket list to pray before the Black Madonna. Certainly is one of them. Zakopane is actually a ski town. And it's one that John Paul II would go to a lot to ski. Some beautiful little wooden churches there in the Carpathians. I think there was a tradition where, I don't know if it was because of Islam, but there's a tradition, or maybe it's just because it just happened that way, that they built a lot of wooden churches, and some of the beautiful churches there are wood. There's this wood inside and out. It feels wonderful, you know. And there are a million candles in there. One day it's all going to go up in flames, but it's such a delight to go into those places. One of the things we're going to do while we're in Krakow is we're going to go and see the Divine Mercy Chapel and the painting of the Divine Mercy, and visit, I guess, the grave of Sister Faustina, Saint Faustina. So that'll be a great opportunity. So many of us have this devotion. It comes to us, the devotion of the Divine Mercy Chapel. And so it'll be a wonderful pilgrimage in that. And then we'll also go to Budapest, which is the birth home of John Paul II. And then we're leaving there to go to St. Mary's Basilica. And then the next day we fly home. So this is the Basilica. And then we fly home. So I think it's going to be an exciting trip. I think there's a lot spiritually that things that maybe on other people's bucket lists, you know, the Black Madonna and the Divine Mercy Chaplet. And I want to encourage everyone to sort of grow in your own devotions as we prepare, to Carl and Zita and to Stephen and to these saints that will be sort of surrounded by. And remember, Carol Wojtyla was named after Carl, right? So Carl is kind of, he's sort of behind, he's the person behind the curtain on so much of this pilgrimage, which I think is going to be wonderful to get to sort of spend time praying and sort of experiencing that world, that period of history that we maybe don't know as much about, but that is so very, very Catholic. So, these are some thoughts. You'll have some questions. Make sure you pick up one of these so you know a little bit more about the trip. Loretta, do you have any thoughts? Did I miss anything?
No, but we've used this tour guide, this tour leader, in 3 other pilgrimages, and she's exceptionally good. She took really good care of us.
So that's a strong endorsement of Belinda, who's the tour guide. Yeah, because we've used her in the past. And so there's a trust level there on the side of the parish. All right, well, make sure you have your passports ready. And because sometimes we forget and update our passports. And hopefully you can save your money and go with us. And it should be, I think we're flying directly from Atlanta to Vienna. I just hate to go 3 stops anywhere, so that was about the only thing I insisted on.
How many people do you think will?
I don't know how many people have to go before we can make it.
Or is there a cutoff?
I don't know. I would imagine there is, you know, but I mean, we're going to actually advertise it in the Georgia Bulletin. So this is something we hope that our parishioners take advantage of, but you know, other people may want to join us, and so you know, hopefully that our parishioners will sign up first, those who are going to go. But I don't think it's been in the Georgia Bulletin bulletin yet, has it?
No, but it will soon.
But it will soon. How many people do we know? How many people have signed up for it already?
I'm not sure about that. I've talked to several people who say they're going to sign up, but I don't know if they've done that yet.
Okay, okay. You had a question?
Okay, no, I've signed up.
You have signed up. Excellent. It'll be a great trip and it'll be great fun to be with you all. So, hope it works out. I hope you enjoy this. Is that okay, Peter? Can we quit? All right.